It's time to fix some of the Timberwolves' volatility here of late with a couple of relatively simple rotation tweaks, a backcourt fix and a frontcourt fix based on the lineup data. Next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Happy Tuesday, everybody. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Welcome into the show today. Today is a game day. The Wolves take on the Blazers this evening. We'll talk about that toward the end of the show. A lot to get to first. I guess we got to start with lineup data. That's the biggest thing. The Wolves suddenly have what's supposed to be a very deep roster. Obviously, both Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert missing the blowout loss on Sunday, which is a big deal. But beyond that, there's some real legitimate rotation questions that we can dig into here. And we've got enough data for the season to this point that we can look at this and be like, all right, when these things happen, the Timberwolves are better, right? When these rotations, when these lineups look this way, the Wolves are better. And especially now with Ayo Dosunmu, who we'll talk about, because no, the numbers aren't great so far with Ayo on the floor. There's a lot of noise there, a lot of factors we're going to dig into. And with his presence, assuming he does elevate the Wolves, and I think he does, there's other guys that don't need to play as much. So we're going to dig in on that, a couple of rotation tweaks, one really in the front court and one in the backcourt that we'll focus on. We'll get into all that here in just a moment. First, though, a big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So there's a lot of data out there. I'm not breaking any ground by telling you that, but it's not hard to find on-off numbers that confirm or disprove or whatever it is you're looking to do. You can find it. I think that's true across the board. Like, for instance, the Anthony Edwards on-off stuff, right? Just because the Timberwolves have a better scoring margin when Ant's off the floor, doesn't mean, or I should say, so actually said a different way, said a better way, just because of Ant's on off looks a certain way, doesn't mean the Wolves are actually better with him off the floor, right? It says just as much about the players that replace him. It says more about the players that replace him and also the players around Ant when he's on the floor, right? It can be a noisy metric, just looking at on off, or God forbid we talk about individual game plus minus, right? Like those are different things. And we're not going to dig into all the, the minutia on it, but it can tell a story. And I think pretty clearly right now, there's like the easiest way to look at the lineups, okay, is to look at the Timberwolves most used lineup, which, by the way, if you look at the league-wide data, it's actually pretty insane. The Timberwolves are the only team with a lineup that has played more than 1,000. Actually, the Timberwolves preferred starting lineup has played over 1,200 possessions together this year, according to Clean the Glass. 1,200 non-garbage time possessions, which I guess almost by definition they would never play garbage time because they're the starting lineup. But they've played 1,216 possessions together. Ant, DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels, Julius, Randle, Rudy Gobert. The next most used five-man unit of any team in the league is 863 possessions, and that's the Pistons' preferred starting lineup. So that's, 353 more possessions that the Timberwolves starters have played than the next most used. And by the way, the next jump under that goes all the way down to Houston's preferred starting lineup at 688. So there's two teams that have had five-man units play more than 700 possessions together. One is the Pistons at 863, and the other is the Wolves at 1216. It's just unbelievable. But if you look at the Timberwolves' best lineups, what is the Wolves' best used lineup that they've actually used for more than 100 possessions? Well, by far, it's their starting lineup minus Julius Randle plus Naz Reid. And shockingly, this is a unit that has only played 136 possessions together this season, but they're a plus 25.9 over at Cleaning the Glass. That's a 94th percentile five-man unit. They're 92nd percentile offensively and 88th percentile defensively The only things they don't do is get to the free throw line very often. They turn it over a decent amount, and they also foul a fair amount. But they have a ridiculous effective field goal percentage of over 62%, a ridiculous defensive effective field goal percentage, allowing just 44% to opponents' effective field goal percentage with that unit on the floor. Okay, so that's the starting lineup minus Julius Randle plus Naz Reid. For the record, the starting lineup that's played over 1,200 possessions together is 67th percentile among 5-man units and is a plus 8.9. So it's not a slouch by any means, but it's 67th percentile, not 94th percentile. And obviously the small sample size plays into there. But how crazy is it that the Timberwolves' best lineup is only one permutation, one player removed from their most used lineup, but they played more than 1,100 less possessions? It's insane. And obviously it's the way that Chris Finch staggers his rotations. And I don't necessarily think it's inherently wrong the way he staggers his rotations, but this is a unit that closed the win on Friday night, for instance. Like they can play significant and effective, obviously, minutes together. But a lot of it is Chris Finch's preference to close games with Julius Randle, his want to organize offense through Julius Randle and allow Anthony Edwards to play off the ball. And of course, Randle is a better, more adept, I don't want to say more willing, but I would say more flexible passer than Naz Reid. That's really the only argument for it. Naz Reid's the better shooter. He's the better offensive player. I would argue he's more versatile defensively. In a vacuum with certain matchups, Randle's the better defender, but across the board, Naz is more switchable. I believe the effort is actually higher defensively than Julius Randle with consistency, and the weak side shot blocking and rim protection is better coming from Naz than it is from Julius Randle. That's more in the weeds than I intend to get here, but the point is just that simple tweak, less Randle, more Naz. And I'm not saying they should start Naz Reid. Like, they're not going to. But Naz Reid should be closing games pending matchups. Naz Reid should be like just a simple tweak of, hey, Rudy's first out or Randle's first out. We're going to bring in Naz and play him with Rudy, right? And you know, just shift who you're removing, because I think typically what the Wolves do is it's Gobert's first out. You play Naz and Randle together. Have Randle be the first out. Play Naz and Gobert together. And then give Gobert the rest to bridge the quarter, play Reed and Randle together for a short period of time. And, you know, just stagger it that way. And give yourself more opportunities for Reed and Gobert to be on the floor, which actually I guess they do that sometimes. It's just at the same time, you're taking out a DiVincenzo for Jalen Clark, or you're taking out a Jaden McDaniels, maybe because of foul trouble and maybe because you're going to take him out and put Ayo Dosunmu in the game. But being more intentional about that unit, that 5-man unit playing together, doesn't feel like it should be that big of a departure from what they're already doing. I'll reiterate what I said a minute ago. The Timberwolves' best lineup is their starting lineup minus Julius Randle plus Naz Reid. It's also the most used, their regular starters are the most used lineup in the NBA. But if you take the Timberwolves' best lineup, it would actually be the 6th best lineup in the entire NBA that's played at least 125 possessions together, which isn't like a crazy number of possessions, but it's enough to be something. And it would be the 6th best, or it is the 6th best 5-man unit in the entire league that's played at least 125 possessions. Again, that's Dante and Naz, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert. It just needs to play together more often. And again, the Wolves closed their win on Friday night with that unit. I want to talk about a potential backcourt fix. A couple of interesting tweaks there. And I want to get into some Ayo Dosunmu stuff because the on-off isn't good so far, and I think he's been dragged down by a couple of different factors. And I think the Timberwolves improved depth. It may seem like a luxury, and all of a sudden Chris Finch was playing 10 guys rotation minutes on Sunday. I think the Wolves could, you know, instead of just basking in all this depth and all of a sudden just like, let's play everybody, I think the rotation could stay short, which is what Chris Finch wants. But there's somebody that can't be in the rotation, right? The regular rotation right now. I'll explain what I mean by that and how Ayo Dosunmu plays into it. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, and more. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I'm going to talk to you about Indeed, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. A reminder, you can get Locked On Wolves ad-free with the Everydayer Club. Plus, members-only Discord access as well. You can join the Everydayer Club at lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Again, lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Or click the link in the show notes to learn more now. All right. So we talked about the front court. Play Naz more, play Julius Randle less. Ideally, and of course there's more layers to that. But the point is, play Naz more with the starters. We can look at the Naz on-off stuff. Weirdly, the Timberwolves defenses, and actually, this is a pretty good example of what I started the show with. Believe it or not, the defense is better with Naz Reid on the floor, and the offense is worse with Naz Reid on the floor. Why is that? Well, it's not because Naz is a better defensive player than he is a better offensive player. It's because of who he's replacing. It's because of how bad Julius Randle has been this year defensively by and large, and how good Julius Randle's been offensively by and large. It's because those guys, and I know they share the floor together sometimes, but the Naz Rudy minutes have been far more successful than the Julius Naz minutes or than the Julius Rudy minutes. So that kind of proves the point that I started the show with, is that the Naz on-off is better than the Julius Randle on-off, but it's flipped even more so than you'd expect. Like if I had told you, well, even now, but if I told you a year ago, like, hey, the Wolves are actually better defensively with Naz on the floor and they're worse offensively, you wouldn't believe me. It's kind of crazy when you really think about it. But that's the point, is that I think Naz needs to play with the starters more often. And he's less of a driver of consistent offense, consistent, efficient offense, and less of a hub than one might expect. And actually, I guess describing it that way, like Naz Reid's actually a better, more seamless fit with the Timberwolves starting lineup than Julius Randle, because Julius is an offensive hub himself. And to have Naz playing off of Anthony Edwards and have Naz spacing the floor and Gobert's on the floor makes more sense than having the below league average 3-point shooting Julius Randle on the floor, who also wants the ball in his hands a lot. And you end up with the my turn, your turn, Ant and Randle, isolation stuff. So this is, I think, going to be my next campaign here, is to it's not going to happen, but even starting Naz Reid, which I know I said last segment, they'll never do it. The skill set actually aligns better, and having Julius Randle coming off the bench and playing less minutes with Anthony Edwards actually makes more sense as well. It's a relatively simple, albeit very simple yet messy and really monumentous if they were to do this, because of the shakeup that would be from a former Sixth Man of the Year, who very likely will win it again this year in Naz, and a former All-Star in Julius Randle, and flipping the two of them. But I genuinely believe that would make a big difference. We got to talk about the backcourt. We'll come back to this later, because I do think there is something there. In the backcourt, I'm going to throw this out there. And with the caveat that a lot of times the team is this record when this guy plays this much or whatever, oftentimes is very noisy. So I'm admitting that up front. There's noise here, no doubt. But I'm going to say it anyway. And I've cited the Jalen Clark stat in the past. Jalen Clark, the Timberwolves are 20-4 when Jalen Clark plays 15 or more minutes in a game. 20-4 when Jaylen Clark plays 15 or more minutes in a game. And if you're wondering about what he's been doing recently, and if you think that maybe he didn't play as well the last couple of games out or whatever the case might be, well, guess what? Jaylen Clark hasn't played in 15 minutes since January 31st. He has not played 15 or more minutes all month. And you know what? The last time he played 15 or more minutes was the fourth game of a 4-game win streak when he was playing double-digit minutes every night. The Timberwolves are 20-4 when Jaylen Clark plays 15 or more minutes. You know what the Timberwolves' record is when Bones Hyland plays 15 or more minutes? 13-11. Barely above 500. Now, the point I'm making isn't a simple, hey, Bones should play less, Jaylen Clark should play more. This is actually more about Bones than it is about Jaylen Clark, which is where I bring Ayo Dosunmu into the conversation. We don't have enough data yet on Dosunmu in a Timberwolves uniform to like truly dig in and talk lineups and all that stuff. However, we have enough evidence that Bones Hyland is feast or famine. And I said this a year ago, nearly a year ago when the Timberwolves initially signed Bones Hyland, that Bones is on the team to give you a shot in the arm when Ant is out for a game, or you need your offense is sluggish and you need to catch lightning in a bottle. That's why Bones is on the team. Bones isn't on the team to regularly play 15 to 18 rotation minutes and just be Bones Hyland. Like, that's not super helpful. We could talk on-off. Jaylen Clark has the fourth best on-off on cleaning the glass on the Timberwolves behind Berenger, who doesn't really have enough minutes to like really, he's only played 117 minutes. So we'll call it the third best behind DiVincenzo, Rudy Gobert, and then it's Jaylen Clark ahead of Naz Reid, ahead of Jaden McDaniels, ahead of Julius Randle, ahead of Anthony Edwards, and definitely ahead of Bones Hyland. The Timberwolves are 74th percentile offense with Jaylen Clark on the floor. I know that sounds crazy. They're also a 60th percentile defense. The offense is actually better than what the defense is with Jaylen Clark on the floor, believe it or not. Now, a lot of that, again, is who he's playing with. The Jaylen Clark lineups, he's with other guys that are really successful offensively, but because he plays his role, it's been a little while since we talked about this, but he's really become an active and an effective cutter. Even though he's not cutting to score, I think it really helps add a dimension to the Timberwolves offense that, like, Bones Hyland's not a cutter. Ayo Dosunmu is. And Ayo Dosunmu can do a lot of the stuff Bones Hyland does, but he's a better defender. He's also just a better catch and shoot guy. And I think he's certainly a better cutter. I think he's better in transition across the board. The point is not necessarily, I'm not, the point of this isn't more Jaylen Clark. It's less Bones Hyland. And don't get me wrong. Bones has had great moments this year. He single-handedly won at least one game for the Wolves. It felt that way. But the defense has largely been bad. The offense has been spotty at best. And he's a valuable 10th, 11th guy if you just need a shot in the arm. I believe that. But he's not an 8th, 9th guy. And it shouldn't be Chris Finch looking at the toy box full of shiny new toys and saying, oh, man, Mike Conley's back and I have Ayo Dosunmu. And I still have Jaylen Clark, and now TJ Shannon's healthy, but I still have Bones Hyland. The point, the approach that Chris Finch should be taking is, I've got my starting five. I've got Naz Reid. I've got Ayo Dosunmu. That's 7 guys right there that I can really, truly trust on a regular basis. And then I've also got, a couple other guys that could play rotation minutes when, assuming this team's fully healthy. I realize Sunday was a bit of an outlier because Naz and Rudy were both out and the Timberwolves played small. And so they were just kind of throwing stuff against the wall to see if it stuck. But you have a clear top 7. And then from there, you can play around. And actually, the Portland game that the Timberwolves won, I think it was just prior to the All-Star break, was actually a pretty good example of that. And we're going to talk about that here in the next segment, where they had 7 guys play 24 or more minutes. And then Jaylen Clark and Bones Hyland were just each, Jaylen Clark played 8 minutes and Bones Hyland played 9. I would, of course, argue for more Clark and less Bones. In fact, I would argue just play 9 guys. And Jaylen Clark could be your 15-a-minute guy or 15-minute-a-night guy. Naz and Ayo can be 20 plus, 25 minutes, whatever the case might be. I would pull Julius Randle's minutes down a little bit. Jaylen Clark is your 8th guy. And then your 9th guy can, if you really want it to be Bones, fine. But I think it's more beneficial for it, honestly, for it to be Mike Conley. And I know I'm going to get lambasted for that. But what Mike Conley can bring to the table as a ball mover and at least as a good team defender. You don't want Mike Conley switched on to Tyrese Maxey, as we saw the other night. But you also don't want Bones Hyland switched on to him either. And I know he had a couple nice defensive plays, but by and large, the team defense from Bones Hyland leaves something to be desired. Maybe it's TJ Shannon ultimately is your ninth guy. Maybe it's Beranger and you play a little bit bigger. But it shouldn't be Bones Hyland. And we could dig in on all the different Bones lineups, and there's some pretty rough two-man lineups out there. He hasn't played a whole ton with TJ Shannon, but that's not good. His minutes with TJ. I think it's clear that Chris Finch needs to lock in on hey, it's so weird and somewhat ironic that I'm talking about this, because what's been Chris Finch's biggest thing is he only plays the guys he really wants to play. And then you look up on Sunday and you're like, wait a minute, he's playing 10 rotation guys and 2 of his top 6 players are out in Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert. So what's going on here? Well, it's because they were throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. But I'm very curious to see what this looks like Tuesday night. Presumably Naz and Rudy will be back. Presumably Naz, I think he's questionable right now. But if he plays, what does this look like? Is it a top 7 with Clark and Bones and TJ on the fringe of the rotation? I think that's probably what it looks like. I think it's what it should look like. And then going back to the first segment, I'd like to see more Naz Reid and less Julius Randle in general. Not suggesting that realistically they're going to give Naz Reid more minutes than Julius Randle, but I think he's got to play more minutes with the starters, and they got to look at sort of staggering those minutes differently. And I would argue the same for the backcourt. All right, let's close today's show by talking about the Wolves-Blazers matchup. We'll peek ahead at the rest of the week. We'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel's giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab the conference title. You might pick Detroit to win the East. Feels like a clear favorite. You might pick the the Spurs to win the West and then Detroit to win the NBA Finals or whatever the case might be. It adds that extra layer of excitement. By the way, I don't know why I picked the Spurs over the Thunder, but maybe you're thinking that. I just watched the Spurs-Pistons game, I guess, on Monday night. That could be why. It adds a layer of excitement to every game down the stretch, and now not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. Timberwolves Blazers just played right before the All-Star break. It was the last game before the break, and Minnesota won that one by 24 points. And notably, Shaedon Sharpe did not play in that game. He's still not playing. He's got the calf strain. Denny Avdija did play in that game. He is out for this game. Of course, Dame is still out. That's it, I guess, for their injury report. But Avdija being out matters quite a bit. Now, he didn't play well the last time the Wolves played the Blazers. He had 11 points on 14 shots. He missed all 7 of his 3-point attempts. He had 5 turnovers, only 3 assists. He was a game worst minus 32 in a game that the Wolves won by 24. A terrible night for Avdija. But obviously he's a really good player. He's not playing in this game. So for the Blazers, it's going to be about Scoot Henderson, who's still on something of a minutes limit. Vit Krejci, a relatively new acquisition for them. They traded for like a month ago or so. They still got a good squad. Like Drew Holiday dropped 23 against the Wolves. They've still got Jeremy Grant, Tumani Kamara, like guys that can do some damage. It's where they're going to get consistent offense from. Now, I say that they just beat the Suns the other night, 92-77, with which I did not look this up, but that feels like it's got to be one of the lowest scoring games in the league this season. The Suns, of course, were super shorthanded. No Dylan Brooks, no Devin Booker. I'm not even sure how they scored as many points as they did. I mean, Colin Gillespie and Jalen Green were the only guys in double figures for the team that night, for the Suns that night. So, I don't know that says a whole lot about Portland. Since the last time the Wolves saw Portland, they beat the Jazz in the first game out of the break, which doesn't say a whole lot. They lost by 54 to the Nuggets, which I don't know, might say a lot. And then they beat this shorthanded Suns team by 15. So I don't know that a whole lot has changed other than Avdia is not going to play in this game. The other thing last time out, outside of the really good job they did defensively in Avdia, the Wolves pulled away in the second half and did a great job getting to the free throw line. They attempted 35 free throws to just 16 free throw attempts for the Blazers. Minnesota also shot 41% on threes, and they turned Portland over 26 times in this game. And like that was the game right there. Minnesota had 14 steals. They had 6 guys with 2 or more steals individually in this game. Julius Randle also had 41 and 7. Remember that Randle kind of just kept scoring in the fourth. It was the fourth quarter when he did all his work for the most part. But not getting sucked into playing with too much pace against this team, especially a shorthanded Blazers team, will be important. The offensive glass is going to be big. Portland had 18 offensive rebounds last time out. Donovan Clingan, I didn't even mention him earlier. He's somebody I worry about in this matchup. He had 5 of the 18 offensive rebounds for the Blazers the last time that they took on the Wolves. So I'd keep an eye on Clingan on the glass. I would be a little bit worried about him scoring in the paint, and then also the the kickouts to Scoot Henderson and Drew Holiday and guys like that, Kumara, guys that can knock down threes off of offensive rebounds. That could be a concern in this one for the Timberwolves. But if they can turn Portland over, Portland is a team that turns the ball over quite a bit, then that will be advantageous for the Wolves overall for the season. And of course, this always gets a little bit noisy because of how often certain guys miss games and stuff. Portland is the most turnover prone team in the league. And 26 turnovers last time the Wolves played the Blazers. They are dead last in turnover rate. 16.8% of their possessions are turnovers. That's nearly a full percentage point ahead of Brooklyn, who's the second worst team in the league in terms of offensive turnover rate. So you can turn Portland over very easily, but they're also number 3 in offensive rebound rate, which is a big Donovan Clingan thing. So if Minnesota can not get sucked into too fast pace of a game, guard the defensive glass or box out, be solid on the defensive glass, and then be advantageous, not gambling, but advantageous when Portland gives you the opportunity to get a steal and score in transition. That's when it's okay to play fast. And we saw Minnesota struggle with their own turnovers in a big way on Sunday against Philadelphia. Like, that was a massive problem. And of course, it continues to be the biggest problem that the Timberwolves have this season is turnovers. Like, that's just straight up. That and fouling defensively, right, are the 2 things that the Wolves have struggled with the most over the course of the season. Portland doesn't draw a ton of fouls, especially without Avdia and I'm blanking on who else I said was out. Avdia and Shaedon Sharpe. Like, it's not a massive concern, but it's still something to keep an eye on that the Wolves have gotten, certainly are known to have issues with, right? Now, obviously an important game coming off of the disappointing loss on Sunday to the Sixers. Gobert is going to be active after serving his suspension on Sunday for the flagrant foul that he had on Friday night against Dallas. And as of right now, as of this recording, Naz Reid is questionable to play on Tuesday night. After the Portland game, they go to LA to play the Clippers on Thursday. And then Sunday, a matinee against Denver on ABC. So a very tough West Coast-ish Portland Clippers Nuggets, a very tough West Coast-ish swing. Portland's a good team. They play well at home. The Wolves were last in Portland on opening night and won that game by 4. And then obviously, like we talked about, won the game just before the All-Star break by 24 at home against the Blazers. So an important game for the Wolves to bounce back. A lot of other teams in the West have won the last couple of days. We saw Houston win on Monday night. We saw San Antonio win on Monday night. The standings continue to shift around the Timberwolves. The Suns, of course, with all their injuries, are now 2 games behind Minnesota. The Wolves are virtually tied with the Lakers, who also lost last time out, for the 5th spot. So that hasn't changed. In fact, all the teams right above and behind the Wolves lost. San Antonio is now 6.5 games clear of the Wolves for the 2 spot. Denver's in the 3, and they're only a game ahead of Minnesota. So 1 game separates Denver, Houston, the Lakers, and Minnesota between 3 and 6. So keep saying this now more than ever. These wins really, really matter. I know they count the same as the ones in October, but they feel so much more impactful because of how much time is left in the season. The clock is ticking, and games against teams like Portland, who, while a play-in team, almost certainly, obviously a game the Wolves should win. All right. We'll have the live postcast after with Luke and Jack, so be sure to tune into that. If you haven't watched it yet this year, it's the live YouTube show at Locked On Wolves on YouTube. You can watch it live after the game. If you miss the live show, you can listen to it right here on Locked On Wolves. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can listen to the postcast. I will be back. I suppose it's a late game, so it'll be bright and early. By that, I mean the middle of the night, Wednesday morning with Wednesday's show. That'll be the post-game pod from Wolves Blazers on Tuesday night. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder that if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll send you to the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel right after this episode. If you're listening on audio, make sure you make your second listen NBA game night on Locked On NBA. Of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.